Okay, good morning, everyone. We're on 16a at the very top, at the Mishnah. Pigul b'kometz v'lo b'levana. We're continuing our discussion of pigul, of half measures of pigul when you do have an improper intention about the time period of eating something of a korban, but only on half of the or part of the korban. So pigul b'kometz v'lo b'levana. What if you do pigul on the kometz, which is the fistful of flour that you take from a mincha, but not with the incense that gets burned on the mizbeach? Or in other words, when you're offering the when you're doing the shechita, then you're thinking something about the levana. Um, no, that wouldn't make sense. If you're during the burning of the labana, which is one of the avodas, you are thinking about eating um, the korban outside of the prescribed times. Or balavana v'labakama, it's the other way around. Ramero mer pigul v'chayvlim olav karis. This is full pigul. V'chachamim omrim ein bo karis ad sheyifagal b'chol hamatir. No, the criteria for pigul is that you have to have pigul, in other words, the wrong intention for the entire matir. Now you recall the matir is the avoda that permits the sacrifice to be eaten. Okay, um, so if you don't do the both all of the avoda, then you can't eat the korban, right? So if you don't do both the lavona and the komets properly, then you have to do both of them um, in order to qualify for people. B'chol hamatir, all of the steps that are required for the korban have to be. You have to have a pigul intent in order to actually qualify as pigul. Um, Umadim Chacham Rav Meir v'minchas chotev v'minchas kanos. The rabbis agree with Rabbi Meir that a pigul thought in only the komets is enough to make it full pigul in the two menachos, the minchas chote, the chatos offering of someone who commits a sin b'shogeg, and of minchas kanos and the sota. Because those have no levana, so there's only one matir, which is the komets. Shein pigul b'komets, shu pigul b'chayvlin olav kar. So if you do pigul when you're taking the fistful of flour, then that's full pigul. Shakometz matir, because that's the only matir. What if you have the shtei alechem? You have two lambs, and while you're doing the shechita of one of the lambs, you're thinking about eating the two mincha, the two loaves of the mincha, the next day, outside of the prescribed time. Or you take one of the two spoonfuls of incense and burn it with the intention of eating both of the all of the lechem apanim. The next day. Rabbi Meir Omer Pigul V'Chayin Love Kari. So parallel opinions. Rabbi Meir says this is full pigul. V'Chachamim Omrim Ein Bo Kari Yifagal B'Chol Matir. You have to do pigul on the whole matir, and here you only did it on one of the two matir. What if you did shechita on one of the lambs and you intended to eat that one the next day, outside the right time? Who pigul? V'chavero kosher. So that lamb is pigul, but the other one, the other lamb that you haven't slaughtered improperly, is okay. Lechol mechavero l'machar. What if you slaughter lamb A with the intention of eating lamb B the next day? Then actually that's fine. Shneim ksherim, they're both okay, because while you're doing shechita on lamb A, you don't have any improper thoughts about lamb A, and the improper thought about lamb B was not during the avoda for lamb B; it's during the avoda for a different animal. So you're actually okay. Amarav machlokas shanosan hakomitz b'shsika v'yasalavona b'machshava. When are they arguing, Rav Meir and the Chachamim? When you had no intention when you do the komets, and then the lavona you had the wrong intention. Okay, so we're going to get into a whole discussion about like lack of intention or a neutral intention. Okay. Aval nasan hakometz v'machshava v'yas alvona b'shtika. But what if you do the kometz first, and you do that with the wrong intention, and then when you're doing the levona, you don't have any specific intention for pigul. So then divrei hakol Pigul. Everybody agrees that that's Pigul. Shekala Osel, Das Rishana Huasa, because anything you do, we're assuming that you're continuing your original intention. So if you start the first avoda, the Kmitza with a Pigul intention, and then you continue to do the Lavona without any specific intention, we're assuming that it's subject to the original intention, which is a Pigul intention, and then they all agree that this is a case where we consider both actions to be done with a pigul intent, and it's full pigul. But Shmuel Amar, that's Rav's opinion. Shmuel Amar, I don't machlokas. No, if Shmuel doesn't buy this, he's like, if you have a neutral intention even for the second of two actions, that's that there's no problem with that. We're not going to apply your specific wrong intention for the previous act to the second act. Yaziv Rava Kamar Lala Hashmatza. So Rava was teaching this dispute between Rav and Shmuel. Esvei Ravacha bar Avhuna Rava. Ravacha asked Rava, B'medvar Amurim, there's a brisa that says, when is it the case that the case of our Mishnah, when does this apply? B'kmitza uvematan kli uvehiluch. The this kind of when does the Pigul thought apply? That is, in other words, what are the avoda steps that Pigul could apply to if you're having the wrong intention? B'kmitza, the scooping, the fistful of the flour, uvamatan kli, and putting it in a kli kodesh, into one of the vessels, uvihiluch, and taking it to the mizbeach. Avol bolo lahaktara, but when it comes to the actual putting it on the mizbeach, nasan sakometz b'shtika v'yasalavon b'machshava. Then, if you do the kometz with no intention at all, and then the lavona, the incense, you do it with the pigul thought. As Sakonis Machshava is Helon B'Shtika, or the other way around. Rabbi Meir Omer, Pigul v'Chayavin Love Karis. Rabbi Meir says it's Pigul. V'Cham Mamrim and Bam Karis says Shifagol B'Cholamatir. So in other words, they're saying what's the story with our Mishnah when the Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim are arguing? That's at the Mizbeach when you're burning it. Okay, so and not and but if you have a blank intention in the steps before that, that doesn't matter. So katanimia, but so part of the brisa says we have the brisa, the case in the brisa of starting with the first step with a pigul intention and the second step with no intention uplige, and yet we see there's a machlokas. So this comes down clearly on the side of Shmuel that there is a machlokas for sorry, of Rav that one second. It is Pigul, so we do carry forward the original intent. That's Rav, right? It seems to support Rav. So the answer is Ema ukvar nasan zvan v'sika meikar. Now we're going to reread this mission, this brisa. Read it to say that he had already done the levona, not that he's doing the levona second with no intention. Rather, the levona came first with no intention, and so then they both agree, Rav and Shmuel, that is a half of a half pigul intent, and that doesn't count. But the Gemara says sheituvas whatever. No, two ways we can reject this. Chada dahainu kamaisa. That would be the same as the first case of the brisa. V'yod hatanya charkach. And the Bryce actually uses the word "and then," so you can't reinterpret this and say no. The "and then" what follows the "and then" happened first, because it makes no sense to say "and then" if the second thing is what happened first. So Tirgumar Rav Chanina b'shtei deos. Rav Chanina answers how could this Bryce accord with Rav? There's two different people involved. Shtei deos, two. There's two minds involved. So in other words, one person is doing the kamitza and one person is doing the levona on the mizbeach. So, one person's intent doesn't, like, if it's the same person, you can say possibly that that whatever he was thinking in the first action, we carry over to the second one. But if it's two different people, there's no reason to say that because person A was thinking something, the person B was also thinking it. Of course not. Okay, Tashma, another question for Rav. When does a pigul, and here we're talking about a single zrika sadam, a single step of applying the blood to the mizbeach. Um, so when is there pigul? The blood that's placed, it's applied to the outside mizbeach. But the inside mizbeach, like all of the applications, there's 43 of them on Yom Kippur. The sin offering of the Kohen Gadol, there's on the inside Mizbech, and there's 11 applications of blood. The achas shel parhalim davashim tzibur. Same with the when the whole tzibur makes an error, does an unintentional mistake. That korban is also in the inside mizbeach, and with 11 applications of blood. Pigel bein barishona, bein bashnia, bein bashlishis. Whether you did pigel during the first set of zrika, the second or the third. Rameir omer pigel v'chayvin love kares. Rameir says that's full pigel. V'chachamim omerim ein bakar said shefal go chol. No, all three of them, all of the applications of blood have to be. You have to have a pigel thought for it to qualify. Katani mia, but the Brisa had said pigel bein barishona, bein bashnia, bein bashlishis. Whether during the first, second, or third set of Zrika Saddam, Uplige, but we see that there's still machlokas. Now, but Rav said that if you did Pigul during the first, you would think that Rav would say that if you had a Pigul thought during the first set of Zrika, and then you didn't have any thought during the second and third, you would carry over your original thought, right? That seems to be Rav's shita, that you assume that the Pegel thought, unless it's explicitly countermanded, it continues. So this brisa and yet the Chachamim argue with Rav Meir here, and so that Rav seems to be incorrect. According to Rav, they shouldn't be arguing. And here, so what do you want to say? That same thing here, that there's two different people or three different people doing the three sets of Zrika. And so we don't say you apply one to the other. So that's okay if there's a machlokas about who has to do the shchita on Yom Kippur. Is it the Kohen Gadol himself, or is it the Kohen Gadol only required for the Zrika Saddam? So if you say the shchita could have been done by a different Kohen and the Zrika by the Kohen Gadol, so fine. So we see that it's possible for different people to be involved in the avoda. Now, we're not talking about the shchita and the zrika by different people. We're talking about the different sets of the zrika, which are all done by the Kohen Gadol. But the application of the idea would be if the Kohen Gadol does the first set of zrika and then he dies. So what happens? There was a substitute Kohen Gadol in the wings, so he took over. In such a case. And so he would be the second person. He would be the person who did the second set. So it's possible for different Kohen Gadol, for different people to do the two different sets of Zrika. And we could say, okay, fine. So what our Brisa is talking about is that kind of case where not that you apply you would apply the same person's intent from first action to the second action. But if they're two different people, like two different Kohen Gedolim, then that wouldn't apply. So maybe that's what our Brisa is talking about. And everyone would agree that you don't apply the Pegel thought of the first guy to the activity of the second guy. But if you say that the same person has to do all the avoda, Michael Neymar, then this brisa is clearly must be referring to a case where one person, one Kohen Gadol, is doing all the avoda, and it says if he does the first zrika with a pigul intent, but the second, that's enough to make the whole thing possible, pigul. But the Chachamim say that there's no pigul here. Amarava, Ma'askina, Kagosha, pigul barishana. The Kohen Gadol, he did pigul on the first set of Zrika, Vishasak b'shnia, and the second one he's neutral. Pigul b'shlishis, and then he had a specific intent of pigul in the third one. Tiamrinan Isak adat cholos adas rishon hu osa. Now, you might say, like, if you have this opinion that if you're doing that a neutral thought is subject to your previous thought, we apply the previous thought to it, fine. Madar piguli b'shlishus lamali. So what do you need a case to tell, this case of, and the third one he had the wrong intention again, right? So that implies that the second one we don't apply the first intention to. Really? So okay, so that's how we can come out and say that the second set of Zrika, we uh, is we don't apply his original Pegel thought to that. Um, okay, so it's good answer. Muscle for Ravashi. Ravashi says, "Mide shasa katani." Wait a minute. You're saying that the Bryson never referred to this whole idea of a specific attention followed by a neutral attention. Bryce was not talking about a neutral attention. All the Bryce said was if you did Pegel in the first or second or third, right? So you're kind of applying something that the Bryson never discussed. Elam Ravashi. Ravashi answers differently. Where you did pigul, you had what's the Bryce talking about? Don't again rereading it. Not that first, second, or third sets of Zrika he had the wrong intention. Rather, in the first and second he had the wrong intention, implying that the third one there's no intention. Diamrinan isok adat cholos aladas rishon ose medar pagule b'shnia lamali. You could say that, like, if it is true that we apply the original intent to to the next case, then why do we have to bother saying he thought about Pegel for the first and second? Even if he didn't think about the second the about it for the second one, it would still be Pegel because according to Reb Meir um, because of his intention on the first one, and we would apply it to the second one. Okay. The Gemara says Vaha Bain Katane, but the Brisa says whether he had a Pegel thought during the first or the second. Kasha. Okay, so the Gemara says, yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so um, okay, so now we go back. Amamar. Rabbi Meir Omer Pigul v'chayvin of cars. Revisiting this view of Rabbi Meir that that it is a full Pigul. Um, in any of the if in any of the three sets of Zrika, Rabbi Meir says if you have a Pigul thought, then it's full Pigul. Michte, let's see. Karin Slamichayev. Ad sheyikruvu kol hamatiri. Now, you can't have cars for Pigul unless all of the materian are done with the Pigul thought. All of the prerequisites are done that way. Diamar and what's the proof for that? Yeratzeh. About Pigul, the Torah says lo yeratzeh will not be accepted by God. Kartzos kasher ka kartzos pasul. It's implying that the procedure has to be the same. In other words, well, here it spells it out. Mahar tzas kasher achi kol matirin. Just as the acceptance of a carbon has to be through with all of the prerequisites done. Afartzas pasul ashihu kol hamatirin. So the lo yeratzeh, like the only thing that is making this not acceptable is the pigul. In other words, all of the other things were done properly, just the pigul makes it unacceptable. The high, now this Yom Kippur situation that we're talking about, Kevan de Chashiv ba bifnim pasle. Um, Once the Kohen Gadol had a pigul thought inside the Kodesh Kodashim while he's doing the Zrika, so so it's um, so whether or not it's full pigul, it's still invalid. Right? You may or may not get cars for it. That's what we're talking about. But certainly, we all agree that by doing the avoda wrong with this pigul thought, that blood um, is now invalidated from being part of the carbon. So ki made bahechal, um, when so when you continue doing the zrika sadam. Might be almost kamade. So then the zrika is not even it's like it's not even blood because it's become puzzle already. So there's no so you haven't done all the materin. So how can Reb Meir say that it's full pigul? Amar Rabba, mashkachas law, it can happen in the following way. Bi'arba par and bi'arba sirim. There's the blood of four par or four goats used for this zrika. In other words, like they keep spilling the blood and having to bring um, having to bring a replacement carbon. So you do the first set, and then you spill the rest of the blood accidentally. So you bring, and that one was pickle, or at least it's puzzle because you had the wrong intention. But you continue on, and with the avoda by doing a substitute animal and using the blood from that. So that blood had never had anything wrong done with it. So that's a valid avoda. So you could do all the avodas. The first avoda, the first zrika is still possible because of this, or is you've done all the avoda, and but one of them was pigul. So that's how Americans say that that pigul took place. Um, so no, so I'm sorry, it's the question. It's like, how can he say that it becomes piegel because all the other materien were, yeah, that's what we said. That because all the other materien were done properly with this scenario, that's how Americans say. Um, that there's full chorus. All the material were done. You did Pigul on one of them. So that's Pigul with chorus. Rava Amar, but Rava has a different answer. Afilu tema echad v'sar echad. You don't have to have this outlandish scenario where you end up doing four different, a different animal for each application of blood. You have a different answer. Lefagule meratze. Um, the avoda with this blood is not doesn't really count, but it counts enough to make the first one pigul. Um, so it's actually I don't know. I think that the answer is kind of appealing to me. It's like, yeah, this avoda didn't count, but since you went ahead and continued with the blood and did the rest of the avoda, you've done all the steps. They may not have been valid, but we're just talking about did the first the pigal intention um, of the first Zrika Saddam, does that count for pigal with kares? And the answer would be yes. Now, we said before, Arba'im v'shalosh, that the Yom Kippur Avoda has 43 applications of blood on the inside Mizbeach. Vatanya Arba'im v'shava, another place says 47. Lokasha, ha command yamar marvin lokaranos, v'ha command yamar and miarvin. Um, when you do a application on the corner of the mizbeach, um, in other words, the south side and the west side. So is that two or one? So since there are four corner applications, if it's one application for each corner, then your total would be 43. But if there was if that's called two applications, like one on each side of the corner, um, then that's an additional four in the count, and that makes 47. Um, okay, Vatanya Arbi Mishwana, but another source, another Brisa says 48. Lakasha, Hakaman Diamar Shiraim Ma'akvin, Vaha Kaman Diamar Shiraim Lo Ma'akvin. Remember that the rest of the blood, the leftover blood, gets poured on the base of the Mizbeach. So is that an essential step? If that's an essential step, then that's an extra step, an extra application of blood, and that brings the total to 48. Ibailahu, they asked. Pigel b'holacha mahu. What if you have a pigel thought when you are walking the komets to the Mizbeach? Um, so is the holacha bringing it halfway around the mizbeach to do the komets? Is that enough for pigul? Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha kikmitza. Um, yes, that's the full halacha kikmitza. Um, second. Okay, the Gemara will explain what this will explain this a little further. But the idea is that just as the pigul during the kmitza is like a full circuit around the mizbeach, so the pigul during the komets also um, is the same. We'll see what the Gemara says. Reish Lakish Amar halacha kaktara. Now the carrying of everything of the kmitza is like the burning on the altar, just as the Pigul thought during the burning of the comets on the Mizbeach is considered only walking halfway around. Okay, we'll see what this all means. Bishlam al Reish Lakish, I understand according to Reish Lakish, halacha kaktara, ikaname halacha delavana. There's also the walking around, the carrying of the Lavona gets carried to the Mizbeach. El Rabbi Yochanan, my Tama. Doesn't the Lavona also go to the Mizbeach? Amar Rava, Kasav Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Avoda She'ena Materes, any avoda that doesn't that is not a matir, that doesn't isn't a prerequisite for the acceptance of the carbon or for the eating of the carbon like kohanim. That's considered a full avoda. Um, so halacha isn't really necessary. Like if it's not considered a full step of the avoda, and so it's not really necessary. We don't have to consider it. Amalei Abaye Hare Shlitas Echad Min Akvasim, the avoda she'ena materasi. What about on the Shtei Alechem? You have the two lambs. Um, if you do the one of them with pigul, um, that is an avoda um, that doesn't because you still have to do the other lamb, right? So slaughtering of one lamb is not a full matir. Uplige, and we have a machlokes between Chacham and Rameir. It's none. Shachad, our Mishnah, Shachad Achad Min Akvasim Lechol Shtei Chalos L'Machar. If you did shchita of one of the lambs while thinking about eating both of the shtei alechem outside the right time, or or you burn the incense, one of the spoons of incense, um, with the lechem apanim, and with the intention of eating all the lechem apanim outside the right day. Reb Meir Omer Pigul v'chayavin le'akaris v'chacham Omrim ein b'akaris she'ifago b'chol matir. They do have this machlokas. So Rabbi answers, Amalei, Misavras Lechem Betanur Kadosh. You think that like the bread, the Shtei Lechem becomes Kodesh like as soon as it comes out of the oven. Shchita Skasi Mikachalei. It is the shchita, the when do they become Kodesh? When you start the avoda, when you start the shchita of the two lambs. V'habala Kadesh Kabbalah Hatir Dame. And the rule is that an avoda that is mekadesh something is like the one that's a matir. So um, uh, Since meeting is being recorded. Since somebody's got a echo on. Um, since where was I? Yeah, since the somebody turned on recording on their uh on their device. Okay. Since the Habala Kaddish Kavala Hatir Dame. Um, if if something is Makadesh, like the shrita of one lamb makes the Lachem Apanim Kodesh, so that is enough to qualify it as a matir. Um, so so the shechita is subject to that rule that you can't have full pigul through only part of a of going around the mizbeach. But halacha it doesn't do it isn't makadesh anything, and it's not a matir for anything. That's not that the rule doesn't apply. Mazir Rav Shimi Barashi, Rav Shimi asks, Acherim Amrim Hiktim Mulim Larelim Kasher. Okay, we're talking about the carbon pesach now. If you have a wrong intention while you're doing the shechita of the carbon pesach, so what's the wrong intention? We're not talking about pigul here. We're talking about you have to have in mind when the pesach can be shared. Typically, is shared by a group, right? You have a whole animal, so a group of people share in one carbon pesach. So, what if you include in that group someone who's not eligible for the Pesach, like an Arel, someone who's not circumcised? Um, so, you can learn Hashem. So, you're thinking in your head, who's going to eat this Pesach? Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and um, and someone else who's not who is an RL, who's not valid. So if you first thought about the kosher people, not kosher people, the people who the Pesach applies to, and then you thought about the RL, that's okay. But hiknim arelim lemulim. But if you first thought about Christopher, and then you thought about Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, then the carbon pesach is invalid. V'kaimalan the v'chatzi matir plige, and when the Gemara in the Pesachim discusses that, they say that the argument there is the principle they're arguing over is chatzi matir. If you've only done part of the matir, so. So this Mishnah is according to the rabbis that whether it's pigul or whether it's some other improper intention like the Pesach for an RL, it invalidates the korban if you have that thought during only part of the avoda. And the Brisa, which is Rav Meir's opinion, holds that it does make it possible. So the point is that the Chachamim extend this opinion even to the carbon pesach, and that's not mekadesh anything, and it's not a matir for anything. So Amarle, misavras dam but savar behema kadosh. You think that that the blood when it's still in the neck of the animal is does that kadosh dam sakin mekad? No, it's the when it comes into contact with the knife, that's when of the shechita, that's when it becomes kadosh. V'habala kadosh kival lahatir dame. And the principle is that any avoda that is mekadosh something is also is like a matir. So the shechita of any carbon becomes, according to the chachamim, you can have pigul when you do it because. You can't have pigul according to the chachamim because it's only a chatzi matir. It's only part of a matir. But halacha is again. So the shlita of the Pesach, any shlita, even of the Shechita of the Pesach, it's that is actually affecting the sanctification, the consecration of the act, unlike halacha, which again is neither makadesh nor a matir. Um, okay, so now we turn back to Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish says that halacha is has the same rule or has the same effect when it comes to pigul as haktara, as burning something on a mizbeach. Um, and a invalid pigul thought while doing halacha does not make the is not full pigul, does not make something pigul. Now Tashma, but maybe Reish Lakish, we're going to question Reish Lakish. Um, B'mezraim Amurim, when does the mincha become pigul? When you're like, okay, so we had said, Reish Lakish said that the pigul applies when you have the wrong intent with the komets, but not the levana. When does that apply? B'kmitza uvamatan kli uvehiluch. The kmitza, taking the fistful of flour, putting it in the kli sharis, and walking it to the mizbeach. My love hiluch daktara. So when we say hiluch, isn't it walking it to the mizbeach? Where's this low? Hiluch de matan kli. We're talking about taking it from the wherever the flour is and walking it over to the kli and putting it in there. That's the halacha. Where, so we're not talking about the typical halacha of so you could still say that the halacha to the mizbeach is not what we're talking about here. So then the order is wrong. You're saying, presumably the rice is listing things in the order in which they're done. Kmitza. Um, so if it says kmitza, matan bekli, and halacha, then halacha is after it's put in the kli, and it means walking to the mizbeach. If it's like you want to reinterpret, then it would say kmitza uva halacha uva matan bekli, like taking the kmitza, walking it over to the kli, and putting it in the kli. But it doesn't say it that way. So halakasha. That's not a good question. Tini hache. So fine. Reread the brisa. Now, but then later it says in the brisa, bolo lahaktara, he comes to the burning it on the mizbeach. Bolo lahalacha mivayle. It should say, um, he then comes to the halacha. Like what happens after you put it in the what happens after the sequence? If you want to say that the sequence is the carrying was from the comets to the kli, then the next thing that happens is halacha. But that's not what it says. It says the next thing that happens is haktara, burning it, implying that the halacha we talked about was walking it from the taking the kli and walking it to the mizbeach, and then the next step is haktara. Halakasha, also another question. Kevan halacha tzarich daktarahi, since halacha is one of the, it's for the purpose of haktara, karila haktara. So, yeah, it really means the halacha. It really means you take the komets, you walk it over to the kli, you put it in the kli, and then you do the haktara. But really, the haktara means the process of haktara, which is the halacha that we're talking about, and the haktara itself. So wait. So when the Brisa says if he places the komets on the mizbeach with no intent, holich mivayale, it should have said not that he placed it on the mizbeach, but he walked it over to the mizbeach with no intent. If that's what it means, kasha. Okay, so the Gemara says, yeah, that's a good question. Okay. So continuing the discussion of pigul with a matir. Hiktir shumshum lechol shumshum. You have a piece of the part of the comets that's the size of a sesame seed. You burn that with the intent of pigul. With the intent lechol shumshum with the intent to eat a sesame seed size piece of the mincha itself the next day, outside of the time period. Um, uh, uh, and so he Ad shekala kometz kulo, and he keeps doing this piece by piece. So you've got the komets, and you go grain by grain. Um, you put on the mizbeach. You're thinking, I'm going to eat a grain, a sesame seed size of the lechem of the shtei lechem, or of the not the shtei lechem of the mincha itself, outside of the time period. So of course. The point here is that the sesame side piece is less than the kazayat. So you're doing it piece by piece, but ultimately you do pigul with every particle. Rav Chizar, Rav Hamnuna, Rav Sheshes. There's a machlokas between Rav Chizar, Rav Hamnuna, Rav Sheshes. Chadamar people. One says it's full people, and you get kares. V'chadamar apostle. One says it's invalidated as pigul, but it's not a full pigul in the sense that you don't get kares. Right? V'chadamar kasher. One says no, you haven't done anything bad here because each piece was less than an olive side. So lema, maybe the principle here is as follows: Mandiam or Pigol Rav Meir. The one that says full Pigol, it's like a Rav Meir who says that you can do Pigol with part of a here. Mandiam or Pasul Korban, the one that says it's only partly Pigol, or it's like it's Pasul, it's invalid, but it's not full Pigol. It holds like the rabbis. Mandiam or Kasher Karabi, and the one that says it's all fine follows Rebbe that says that who said earlier that you don't put together different incorrect intents. That was what a couple of days ago we had that opinion of Rebbe. Remember that if you do the shlita of one of the lambs with the intention to eat half a kazayas, and then the shlita of the other one to eat half a kazayas on the wrong time. So Rabbi said it was kosher. So maybe that's the basis of our three-way argument. Where it says mimai. Well, where do you get that from? Dilma adkan lokama Rabbi Meir Hassan. Maybe Rabbi Meir said kosher only there. Ela dechishev b'shiura because um, because the intention for Pigul like he did a like the avoda that he did was a full avoda. He did a kazayas size burning. So maybe that's why it's kosher. But here when burning each piece, none of those constituted an actual avoda because they're each too small. Well, maybe Rameir would not say that it's kosher. Aviyakan Loka Amar Rabbanan Hasan, maybe the rabbi, the Chachamim, who would say puzzle, who you want to think they would say puzzle, maybe in that Mishnah, that you can't do pigul through a chatzi mater, lo chashiv le bekule mater, because he wasn't thinking about the whole mater, only part of it, only the half of it. But here, in the end, he had a pigul intention for every little piece of the matir, and so maybe they would say that this actually counts as full pigul. Hachinami the pagul. Maybe they would consider it pigul. V'yakan lokamar Rabbi Hassan, and maybe Rabbi in the case of the two intentions combining, maybe there he would only say Eladolo Hader Malye Meosa Avoda because you didn't complete like the Pegel thought during the avoda in which you started it, right? So, you had a Pegel thought for the little piece, and then you stopped, and then you did another one, another one, another one. Aval hacha dehadar malye liyosa avoda. But here you had your Pegel thought from start to finish. I'm sorry. In the case of the Mishnah from the other day, maybe Rebbe would say that he never finished he only did a chatzi zayis, right, with pigul intent. But in this case, with the sesame seed size things, like from start to finish, he had a pigul thought. So maybe we combine them. Hachinami the puzzle. Maybe Rebbe would say that is puzzle. Ella. So how do we explain this machlokas? Mandi amar pigul divrei hakol. Um, Rather, it's like the one in our case who said it's full pigul. He means everybody holds its full pigul. Mandi Amar the Apostle Divrei Kol, Mandi Amar Kosher Divrei Kol. They're not just following a specific opinion. They're saying no, that everybody would agree in the case of the sesame seeds size that that my opinion is right. Mandi Amar Pigul Divrei Kol, the one who says Pigul, what's his reasoning? Kasavar derech achila b'kach v'derech haktar b'kach. He would hold that that this burning little pieces and the thought of eating little pieces one at a time, that's considered um, that's considered eating, and that's considered burning, right? Whereas the Umandi Amar Pasul Divrei Akol, one that would say no, it's not full pigul, but it still invalidates. It's kasaver derech achila b'kach ve'en derech haktar b'kach. That yeah, you could eat something, little bird-sized bites. That would be considered um, uh, considered eating, but that's not how you burn something on the mizbeach. That's not considered proper avoda. Va'avai la kimincha shalo huktara. It would be like a mincha that never had haktara. Amar kasher divrei kol kasavar derech haktara b'kach ve'en derech hachila b'kach. And the other one would say that yeah, this is a proper haktara, but not a proper way of eating. So thinking you're going to eat it that way is not really pigul, and then it's kasher. And we will stop here for today. Have a good day, everybody.